Hi, Mariana.
Hi, Karen.
I am so glad to
Hello.
be here.
And hi, Stacia.
Hi.
Hello, everyone, and good evening to our audience. My name is Seisha. I'm the social media manager here at Charis Books and More, which is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore, and also of Charis Circle, which is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books. And tonight, we are so excited to host Mariana Chilton in conversation with food justice advocate and activist Karen Washington for a discussion of the painful truth about hunger in America, which is a radical and urgent new approach to how we can solve problems of hunger and poverty in the US. I'm going to start off by introducing Karen, who's going to be our amazing conversation partner tonight. Karen is co-founder of Black Urban Growers, or BUGS, an organization supporting Black growers in both urban and rural settings. She's a former board member of Why Hunger, a grassroots support organization, and Farm School NYC, which leads workshops on growing food and food justice across the country. She's also board president of Green Worker Cooperatives, which builds and sustains worker-owned green businesses to create a strong local and democratic economy rooted in gender and racial equity. Additionally, she's on the board of directors of Soul Fire Farm, the Black Farmer Fund, and the Mary Mitchell Family and Youth Center. Since retiring from physical therapy in 2014, she's been a co-owner and organic grower at Rise and Root Farm in Chester, New York. She stands on the shoulders of her ancestors and sows seeds of love, healing, and liberation for future generations. It's a beautiful bio.
Right.
And of course, it's my honor tonight to introduce Mariana Chilton, the person of the hour, who is also a professor of health management and policy at Dorn's Life School of Public Health at Drexel University. She has testified before the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives on the importance of childhood nutrition and served as an advisor to the Institute of Medicine and Sesame Street. She founded Witnesses to Hunger to ensure that people who know hunger firsthand can inform the national dialogue on poverty, and she served as the co-chair of the bipartisan National Commission on Hunger, meant to advise Congress on how to end hunger in America. Her new book, which we are celebrating tonight, is The Painful Truth About Hunger in America: Why We Must Unlearn Everything We Think We Know and Start Again. Audience, please join me in welcoming these two incredible community workers here with us tonight. And before I pass it on, I'm just going to go over a few quick housekeeping things. I want to remind the audience, let y'all know that you can leave questions, comments, and of course, lots of love for our authors in the chat box. There's also going to be a Q&A session at the end of their discussion, so please give them lots to talk about, ask lots of questions, and keep them busy. And then one more thing, which is that buying your book from Charis supports our work and allows us to keep putting on events like this. So if you would like to purchase The Painful Truth About Hunger in America, you can click on that teal button right below all of us and order from our website. Thank you. I'm going to hop off and see y'all at the end.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. First of all, what can I say, Mariana? I got to know Mariana by a mutual friend. I get requests to read a lot of books. And so I say, okay, Allison Cohen said, Karen, there's a person I want you to meet, and there's a book I want you to read. And so I had a, slight conversation with Mariana. But then I started reading that book, and baby, I couldn't put it down. Mariana, I'm just so, so proud to be in your presence because you really peel back the food system in a way that for so long people believed that it was broken and needed to be fixed, and that people felt good that they were being handed out food and applying for SNAP and welfare, but you uncovered some of the hard realities and truth behind the food system that everyone needs to know. So, first of all, I want to start with you telling us a little bit about the book, but then how long did it take you to do the book? And then what was your motivation to attack hunger in a way that really exposes the harm that it presents?
Oh, thank you. What a beautiful question. I'm so delighted and very honored to be in conversation with you, Karen. Thank you so much. Talking with you is like talking with a beautiful spiritual being that's here in our midst in the present day, but I feel like you're coming to us from the future. Just thank you. Thank you so much. Well, let's see. I really got taught about the experience of hunger and deep poverty from Black women. And everything that, the deepest wisdom that I've learned is from them and the people who've experienced hunger and poverty firsthand, and also from Native communities. I got my start working with the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho nations in Oklahoma, who taught me everything that you do, Mariana, should be rooted in love. And you don't do this you don't learn about us to take advantage of us or to advance your knowledge or advance the knowledge of the world, and kind of take it somewhere else. You don't take something away from us. You join with us in love and in solidarity, and do it because you love us and love our people. And that ethos that I was taught by the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho nations has been with me all along. And when I moved to Philadelphia and wanted to learn more about the experiences of hunger from people who use the food pantries in Philadelphia, I kept that ethos of love and deep respect for the people I was working with. And I met a really incredible woman named, who I call in the book Julene, who made a painting for me. And I'll talk about that in a second. But she also gave me a lot of love. She gave me a beautiful gift to help me learn more about hunger and also to teach the world about hunger. And it's really the beauty and the wisdom of Black women in Philadelphia and their grit and their courage that keeps me going. You asked why, what's underneath hunger and why did you stick with this? Why did you write the book? I wrote the book because I felt that it was the most important way to honor the women that I've worked with, to get their experiences and their stories out there. And also that I had to do it. I didn't really have a choice. At first I thought, I'll help the women I know to write their books, because they should be writing these books. They're the ones who have the wisdom and the knowledge. But I think, writing a book is not the kind of top thing on the list, and not a lot of people have the time to write or to read. And what I started to see was a lot of patterns, because I was talking to so many different people. And that pattern among the women I was talking with in the early days in Philadelphia was a pattern of violence. So I would approach people and say, I'd love to hear about your experience in grocery shopping, or, having enough money for food. And we would start there, but really within 2 or 3 minutes, it immediately dropped into their own experiences with violence. Violence in their homes, violence that they experienced during their childhoods, violence in the communities, violence from caseworkers, mean welfare caseworkers. They're on the list. And I would say policy violence and the violence of racism and discrimination, the violence of genocide that really could be stretched all the way back to times of enslavement and to colonization. So those conversations got deep, and they got deeply important for me, and they transformed me. And really, I feel like they wrote the book. They wrote the book through me. So I'll tell you about the book, and then we'll go from there. The first part of the book is grounded in the experiences of the women I was talking with in the early 2000s. I'm a qualitative researcher. I do ethnography, which is like participant observation. I would go to the grocery store with people, or I would go to the food pantry with them, or I'd bring their groceries home with them and learn about their lives alongside. I would go to the welfare office with them. I'm also an epidemiologist, so I do quantitative work, which means myself and my team, we would interview people in the emergency room at the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia called St. Christopher's Hospital for Children, and we'd ask questions that could be reduced to a number. Like we'd ask about food insecurity questions. Did you ever worry about not having enough money for food? Yes or no? And then that got turned into a 1 or to a 0. So I did a lot of qualitative and quantitative work. So the first part of the book is grounded in the experiences of people I spoke with personally and that my team spoke with, to demonstrate the patterns of violence underneath hunger And one of the most important arguments of the book is that to work on hunger and to understand hunger, you have to go way beyond food. You have to go underneath what's going on. And that's really about the power dynamics in the family, the community, in our country, globally, power dynamics, extremely important. And I'd like to talk more about that violence, but I'm just going to give the overview of the book and then we'll get into it. So that's the first half. So I talk about if violence of racism, discrimination, gender-based violence, rape, and child abuse are underneath people's experiences of hunger. And we want to, what do we have in place now to address hunger? So we have SNAP, or this the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamps, and we have WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, a nutrition program for pregnant and lactating moms and really young kids. We have school breakfast and school lunch, and those are all the big programs that are the major forces to stem the severity of hunger in the United States. And there's also the emergency food system, where people may go to a food bank and get, quote, free food, but that's food that's outdated, often before it's going to go to the dump, gets into the emergency food system, and people get very humiliated by trying to get emergency food, cans of food, those kinds of things. So I talk about how the programs that we have in place are simply a mirror of our societal violence in the United States. We live in a culture of domination. That's what's happening in people's lives. Then I show what their experiences are with public assistance, with emergency food, and I show how the systems themselves can be quite violent. So I'm asking us to start rethinking everything. The current systems we have in the United States to address food insecurity and hunger are inadequate, ineffective. A lot of people say the system is broken, but the women that I spoke with say it's working just as designed to keep black and brown women down. Knowing that, what are our solutions? The last part of the book is about the importance of solutions that are political, personal, and spiritual. And politically, the first two things to do are reparations for descendants of people who were enslaved in this country. And by reparations, it's not just financial payouts, but deep apology, ensuring that people get mental health care and those kinds of things. Also, decolonization. We need to give land back to indigenous people. We're all on stolen land. The United States is an illegitimate nation state. The reason we're so wealthy is because we plundered the lands of indigenous people and used slave labor for 250 years. That's what makes us, quote, rich as a nation. Those are the first two things. Then I talk about other solutions. And then I talk about personal work to undo white supremacy, and then spiritual work to bring in more love into the world. So it's thick. Let's put it that way.
But it's absolutely excellent, Mariana. And I want to bring this conversation because, believe it or not, you're a white woman and you go in and try to speak to some black women. You know, my own experience being around whites, there's a hesitation to even sit down and talk about your deepest thoughts and your deepest feelings.
Yeah.
So what was it that made you, first of all, feel comfortable to even reaching out to black women? That's number one. But what was it that made them eventually feel comfortable to speak to you?
Beautiful question. Yeah. So most of the women who talk with me about why they agreed to speak with me, first of all, said they were suspicious, of course, because as a white lady, you just don't tell a white lady your business, number one. They would talk about needing the money, to be honest. So to do the research, I was paying people to do interviews. And I'm at when I got started with the first studies that I did was at the food pantries in Philadelphia. So I know people are down and out. And it's going through the institutional review board. It couldn't be too much money because then that would be sort of coercive, right? But it had to be enough to make it worth people's time. So people, I think, when people told me about when I asked them, why did you talk with me? They first said, well, to be honest, I needed the money. And then with Witnesses to Hunger, they wanted the camera because I was giving free cameras. It was a digital Canon PowerShot. And I will talk about Witnesses to Hunger in a second. But once I'm in their kitchen or in their home in some way, I think this is not true for everyone, but I think in my approach, I always approach as a beginner, as someone who doesn't know anything, which is very true. I don't know anything about the experience of hunger, and I'm honest about that. And I think people could feel a sense of humility and a sense that I really cared, and I coming from a place of love and deep concern, and a sense of deep listening. Like I talk about Julene. Julene is one of the people in the book that has made this painting that I talk about a lot. When she saw me a year after I interviewed her, and she saw me at the food pantry, and she came up and said, "Hey, are you doing interviews?" She didn't remember my name, but I remembered her name. I'm like, "Hi, Julene." She's surprised that I remembered her name. And of course I did, because she taught me so much. She said, "Hey, I want to do another interview." And I said, "Well, I'm not doing the study." She said, "Well, I need the money." And I said, "Well, come to my office, and I have some money there, and I'd love to talk with you about it." And she came to the office with the painting. Actually, I can show it it's underneath the thing that's holding up my computer. She came to me with this painting.
In the barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something.
I told you stuff I hadn't told anybody. And I will never tell anybody. Because first of all, you're a stranger. I'm not going to see you again. I'm not going to lose anything necessarily by telling you. And she said, I also felt like you needed to know about what that experience was like. And people need to know. People must know the truth about what's really going on. So that to me was like a hook. Like you better do what I'm telling you to do, which is to teach people. If you're going to talk to folks, you need to share it out. So I think it's a sense of humility and follow through, sticking with it. Power, Tiana Gaines Turner, who's a member of Witnesses to Hunger, she often would say, I talked to you, because I wanted the money, but when you sat down and there was a mouse that was crawling over your bag and your shoes and you didn't flinch, I thought, okay, I can talk to her maybe a little more. So I think it's an unflinching ability to be in community with people. Doesn't happen for everybody. And some people got in trouble with their family members, like their own moms. These were moms of little kids, but maybe they're 22 years old. Their own moms would tell them, "Why are you telling that white lady your business?" Because it's very hush hush. Keep things under wraps. Don't let anybody know you're struggling. So it's about keeping that facade. So I don't know. I got a little lucky, and not everybody wanted to talk with me, for sure.
I could see that, but what I found also by reading the book, how you brought out this sort of charity-based subsidized food system where on the outside, so there's two sort of parallels. On the outside, you have the person that can write the check and the person that is handing out the food and rah rah rah, and they're making them feel good. And then you're handing out food to people, and you feel good about that. But yet you talk about the humiliation and the feeling of the person that's receiving that food.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really, really paramount in terms of looking at the food system. Because what we see is on commercials everywhere, philanthropy, and everyone's feeling good. And you never think about the person's feeling that is receiving that. The underlying humiliation, despair. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about the emergency food system. So the emergency food system really, compared to the SNAP, WIC, school breakfast, school lunch, that's huge. That's like two hands. Emergency food is like, doesn't do much. A lot of people don't really rely on it. The biggest anti-hunger programs are the federal nutrition assistance programs. But the emergency food system wants people to think that they're the number one way to fight hunger in America, and can bamboozle you. They'll get into your mind and make you think, oh, if I just click here, I can give money and donate food and donate money, to help feed people, or I can donate my cans. And boy, aren't I great. I'm so good. I'm such a good person. I'm helping to end hunger. And it also happens, that's just us, we're convinced by the local postman who's maybe collecting cans, or our children's teachers. But then the big companies love to brag about it. Walmart is the number one case. I talk about Walmart as triple, quadruple dipping. It's kind of like a welfare, like the queen of welfare is Walmart. Walmart as a corporation. Why? Because they don't want to pay money to send food to the dump. So they get the food bank to come and pick up the food for free. So Walmart just saved lots of money. And now that increases their profits. Then Walmart pays their workers such low wages that the workers are eligible for food stamps or SNAP benefits. So the federal government is supplementing their wages with Medicaid, health insurance, and SNAP benefits. So that increases the profits of Walmart even more. Then because Walmart has given away money to the food banks, they can show off and make it look like they're a really good company. Then they advertise to say, shop at Walmart to end hunger. It's phenomenal, isn't it? And then they'll go to the food bank people and say, we want to do a photo op and make the news. And they'll convince somehow journalists to cover it. They have a big check that says Walmart gives $100,000, which is pennies, to the food bank. And then they're lifted up. So the people who are wealthy, and the vast majority of people who are on the boards of food banks and who are giving money to food banks are white-owned corporations or very, very wealthy white people. They're bragging about it. So it lifts up their reputations. In the meantime, what is the experience of going to a food pantry? There's not one person that I've talked to, and I've talked to hundreds personally myself, and my staff has talked to thousands. There's not one person who enjoys going to a food bank. And one woman explained it very, very clearly. She said, you have to leave your pride at the doorway if you're going to a food pantry. And because it's humiliating, number one, that you need to go get free food. You're made to feel less than. You're picking up food that is often going to be wasted. It's meant for the dump anyway. In other words, it's meant for people who we consider to be garbage or second-class citizens. And the quality of the food is very bad. I talk about, well, I'll stop there. So that's the built-in humiliation into the system that we don't think about is what is it like to go to a food pantry? It's so humiliating. And why would anybody want to be a part of that? How could people possibly think that bragging about giving money to the emergency food system is a good thing when the end users are humiliated? It's the way the charity model works.
And then you have in your book, you talk about how people want to try to get better jobs, but they are stuck. They're stuck in a system that if they make too much money, then they don't get their WIC check or they don't get their resources. And so it just continues to keep them down. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thanks so much. So that built-in domination, the built-in humiliation is not just in the emergency food system. It's in the public assistance programs. People are humiliated to go into the welfare office, first of all, and they're often mistreated or surveilled, made to feel like a criminal for applying for assistance. Then once they get on, sometimes things can really improve. But let's say that someone is getting SNAP benefits or foods. People know it as food stamps, so I'm going to say food stamps, okay? People apply for food stamps, and then they may be doing great at their job, and someone wants to give them a raise. They may not want to take the raise because it might put them just over the edge of eligibility for food stamp benefits. So they won't take the raise. They won't try to increase because they know that if they get a little bit of an increase financially, they'll lose their food stamp benefits and they'll be hungrier than they were before. And, this is called the benefits. People call this like a benefits cliff. This is in every public assistance program we have in the United States. WIC, SNAP, housing subsidies, all of them have these little cutoff points. And each program has different cutoff points. So you're constantly having to navigate a patchwork of programs. And most of the time, people are so afraid of losing their assistance because it does help them stay out of the hospital, it does help them stay healthier, that they won't be able to really get themselves up and out of poverty. They'll stay in there to get the assistance. So they know that the system itself is meant to keep them down. So there was one member of Witnesses to Hunger was a program where I gave women digital cameras to take pictures of what their experiences are like in participating in public assistance and what they want to change about it. And we made exhibits so that they could use those exhibits as a platform to speak directly to policymakers and to the press and to the public about their experiences and how to change it. So one of the members of Witnesses to Hunger took a picture of just a simple chain against a drywall. She said, Mariana, this is what welfare is like. It's a chain meant to keep you down, because anytime you're getting ahead, they'll yank away your assistance program, your assistance. You're worse off than you were before. Even though you're playing by the rules and you think you're advancing, welfare is meant to keep you down. And this is why I advocate for universal programs, universal basic income, where there's just a basic floor where everyone gets a certain amount of money so that they can pay for food, pay for housing, pay for transportation, all basic needs. And no one should have to hit a certain cutoff point, because that creates separation in our society. It separates the wealthy from the poor, oftentimes Black from white, different regions. The other thing is that the systems are often used as a way to dominate families, to force families to get worried about their children. It separates the parents from the child. And I'd love to talk about that if that's an interest, about the foster care system and children, how they're weaponized.
Yeah, definitely. But before we start down that road, I want you to talk about the programs that you've started, like the Witness for Hunger program. I read about the Eats Cafe. So let's start with that.
Okay. Thanks. So my early years were about the qualitative work and what's really going on. And then I started doing epidemiology with a program called Children's Health Watch. And that was straight up epidemiology, like big numbers of people. And what was important about that study, and that's still going on in multiple cities around the country. And I was working on that for 15 years, and it's still ongoing in Philadelphia. I gave it to another faculty member there. We were able to see the relationship between SNAP use, or food stamp participation, and how that affected child hospitalization rates and reports of food insecurity and even depression. We could see how public assistance programs were landing in the bodies and brains of children and their caregivers. And that work really brought me and my colleagues to Congress to be able to testify about the importance of public assistance programs for health and well-being. Then I was really frustrated with the federal government for changing the food insecurity terminology, and I felt like no one was really paying attention to what was going on. And I was remembering Julene's painting is staring back at me in my office, like, not good enough, Mariana. So I got started with Witnesses to Hunger, which was a participatory action program where I gave people cameras to take pictures of their own experiences so that they could express themselves, to get myself out of the way and get the women who know firsthand what's going on. So we created, dozens of exhibits all up and down the East Coast. That we worked with over 100 people in Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., New Haven, Connecticut, and even we had a member of Witnesses on Martha's Vineyard Island. And we had exhibits where the exhibit became like a launching pad to talk to legislators, talk to the public, to have panel discussions. So each city had its own sort of interests, and the members of Witnesses decided what was important to them. What was most important to members of Witnesses in Philadelphia was safety, 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 safety. In other words, they're experiencing so much violence, and they wanted to have trauma in the middle of the exhibit with some of their photographs, and also housing, their health, how much they love their kids, how much they celebrate their children. And we were able to bring their exhibits to Washington, D.C., United States Senate, to the White House. This is during the Obama administration, to the House of Representatives, to city halls, and just incredible, wonderful places up and down the East Coast. And there were always legislators there who were listening, and we would talk about direct policy change that needed to happen. That was exciting, and Witnesses ran for about 12 years in Philadelphia. And they're still active in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm hoping that some of the folks from New Haven are tuning in, but you can find out more about what they're doing by searching for Witnesses to Hunger New Haven. I got frustrated, though, with that, and I'll get to the last two programs, and then we'll go on from there. The other two programs I talk about in the book are the Building Wealth and Health Network and the Eat Cafe. Mm-hmm. I got frustrated with legislators because, on the one hand, they would listen to members of Witnesses about food insecurity and hunger say, yes, we support SNAP, and they would find ways to increase SNAP or to work with it. And then a few years later, I'm not going to name any names, but legislators decided that maybe we should just take money from the SNAP program or food stamps and put it in the child nutrition program. So they're not really helping. They're not helping. They are going back on their word about about saying that hunger is important to them. So I lost a lot of faith in policymakers, and I thought, well, I got to change the system from within. So we built the Building Wealth and Health Network, which was for people on cash welfare, which is the worst public assistance program in the country. For instance, in Philadelphia, you get, if you're on cash welfare, it's called TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, you get maybe $432 a month if you are a mom of 2 kids under the age of 5. You can't do anything with that. You're lucky if you can buy some pizza, maybe some shoes. Anyway, that program, I wanted to get into that program and figure out how to help people heal from their experiences with trauma. So we brought people together in circles to do trauma-informed healing support. When I knew that when you get women together, like members of Witnesses, when they got together, boom, it was so powerful. You get like 4 or 5 women in a room, 10, 12, you have a revolution. It's amazing. So the Building Wealth and Health Network brought women together, and then we helped them open bank accounts. And then we would help them when they get money into their bank account, we would match their savings, and we would help them build up their financial savvy, and also help them make sure that they remembered to pay themselves first in their own bank account. With that program, we were able to reduce food insecurity and depression. No pills, no food involved. It's still ongoing, and you can find out more if you search for it. The last thing I did was I also got frustrated with that because it wasn't going fast enough. And I'm like, people must eat now, today, really good food. And then I want to ask you some questions too, Karen, about food. And even though I say, I got to think beyond food, I wanted to start a cafe where people could come and eat a 3-course meal, no questions asked, with a beautiful place, listening to jazz, a sense of community, a sense of fellowship, delicious food. And that was the Eat Cafe, stood for everyone at the table. And people could come and eat however much they wanted, and then they would just write down how much they could pay. No questions asked. And that was the idea, is like everything should be universal. Just because you're a human being means you should be treated with respect, you should have delicious food to eat, and you should experience some joy and fellowship and belonging. And the Eat Cafe is the one program that didn't last as long as I was hoping for. It only lasted for about 2.5 years. We really wanted to turn it into a cooperative that stayed in the community, but I wasn't able to pull it off. So there's some failure in the book as well. So people say, could it be a success? It's a failure. I don't know. We tried.
I don't think it's a failure. I don't think it was a failure. I think you put a lot of nuggets of ideas where people can maybe, continue to do. One thing I really wanted to talk about too, which I really found fascinating, is that when people look at hunger, they look at it through the lens that people don't have access to food. And by reading your book, you peel back. It's like, wait a second, it's not about people not having access to food, but there's underlying trauma and violence, especially amongst Black women, that we don't see as a Black person. We're not going to show that on the surface. That's something that has been in our historical history for hundreds and hundreds of years. We carry that burden of trauma and of violence. And so, just reading your book and bringing that to the surface, it makes people understand that it's more than just feeding people. And how do we as a society help women who have gone through trauma and not sort of feel that you can fix it by handing out some groceries?
Right? It's ridiculous. That cannot be done. It can ease some stress, but not by much.
And also you talked about the when it came to the men in these women's lives, and how even though the system again is against Black men, as we see the increase in prisons, and so when the women tried to, I guess one of the requirements was like, is there a man or a baby's father in the picture, and many times women were reluctant to say, because if there was, then that person, that male figure, would either have to, help support, and in many instances they could not, and if they didn't, they would go to jail. So this is a system that continues, if you look around, continues to fail, and it continues to connect when it comes to, again, this oppressive, racist, misogynist system that has been here for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yes. 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 There's so much there. Thank you, Karen. I think one of the earliest interviews I did was with a woman I called Tanisha. And I was saying, oh, well, where do you get your groceries? It's a simple, innocent little white lady question. Where do you get your groceries? And she's like, well, I don't like to go to that grocery store down the way. And I said, well, why not? And she goes, I don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, well, maybe you could just give me a little hint. And then she explained what had happened to her is that she got into, after she grocery shopped there one time, she got into a van and thinking she was getting a ride home, which was like kind of standard practice, using a hack. It's an informal taxi driver. And instead of that, there were men in the back of the van, and they brought her to an abandoned lot and raped her. And she taught me, I was like, well, did you go to the police? What did you do? Did you get some help? And she said, no. I went to the police and they didn't care. No one ever came to investigate. Turns out her own daughter also got raped, and the police didn't help her at all. And I was forced to start thinking about, how is it possible that so many women that I talked to had been raped or had been abused or violated in some way, and no one's doing anything about it? Like, how is that possible? Where is the justice? So I really had to take a step back and start reading other Black women scholars about what does it mean to be a Black woman in America? Why is this pattern? What can we do? Why are we doing this? So I relied a lot on Christina Sharp, a really beautiful book called In the Wake. And she brings it all the way back to the transatlantic slave trade, and about how it is that Black women that, were raped in order to plunder, in order to make a profit, in order to create more slaves. And that was legalized rape, legalized violence. And I have to say those, and I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's just, but may other people who are listening in remember that this energy, this disrespect, is not just something that happens today. It is 500 years old. And it's the same thing with Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous women. The fact that so many are gone missing and the police don't investigate. So I really had to start learning about what that was like, and learning about how the police are a violent entity in and of themselves. The justice system is a form of violence in and of itself. And also, like, something simple as applying for Medicaid. I talk about one woman from Witnesses saying that she couldn't get Medicaid until she identified who the father of her child was. This is how misogyny works in the system, in the welfare system. And she knew that if she did, that she'd have to give the address, but she didn't have the address because he had been a very violent person. And then she couldn't get assistance. So or another woman talked about how she did not admit that the father of her kids was living with her, very loving, beautiful, wonderful man, very much of a family man, but deeply poor. And she pretended, oh, I don't know who the father of my kid is because he's my pimp. Like, she would make something up so that she could get just a tiny little bit of help, because otherwise he would have to pay child support to the state. And then if he didn't pay it to the state, again, he'd be on a list. He'd be potentially put in jail. I have in my book, I can't remember who was shot in the back. He was running away from the police because he had unpaid child support. I mean, it's just, the violence goes so deep, and the misogyny and racism, they're entangled. You can't just say it's just misogyny or it's just racism. It's all integrated.
One last thing I want to talk about, which is really important. You talk about, and it really sort of made me think about the foster care system in terms of, for so long, as Black folks, from the beginning of slavery, our children have always been taken away from us.
Yeah.
Always been set up to take, even with indigenous people as well. There's always been this separation of taking our children away, taking our children away. And, again, reading your book and seeing the parallel with slavery, and the foster care system, it does the same thing. It does the same thing whereby, and what you said was so poignant, is the fact that here's a woman trying to take care of her children, trying to find a job, there's limited daycare, and yet that woman who's in the foster care system taking care of her children are making more money than the person that's trying to get a job to keep her children.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for noticing that moment, finding that moment in the book. That was killer. I mean, I think so many times I've talked to women who were so afraid to admit they couldn't feed their kids because they felt like their kids would get taken away. And then other women who had their children taken away. And then the foster family got more money. And that is a form of social control, and by the U.S. government, by men, and I'd also have to say white men. This is a long-standing tradition that needs to be abolished. And another great book by Dorothy Roberts called "Torn Apart." We seem to have a friend who put in the wake in the chat. Maybe that Bridget, can you put in "Torn Apart" in there too, by Dorothy Roberts? What was I going to say about that? So the idea is that, the bond between parent and child is the most sacred bond, not just morally, but physically, spiritually. If you lose that bond with your mother or your parents, that is a very, very deep trauma. And I have to say that I think our society is deeply suffering from that type of parental separation. Another example of parental separation is the summer nutrition program, summer meals program for kids. We had it. The U.S. government said only kids can eat. And they would literally have signs saying, "Do not feed adults." And that's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not too long ago. Unbelievable how we disrespect families and separate them. Disheartening.
So we've been talking about the negative aspect of the food system in general and just in society. So what can we do? Because I think because when I read the book and I spoke to you, you said, Karen, because it was very difficult, folks, it's very difficult to read, because if you have a heart and if you are part of the human race, it's going to touch your soul. But you said to me, Karen, continue to read, because there's something at the end. Continue to read. And so as I continued to read, I said, I was able to exhale, because you did say things that were profound on how we as a society can do better. So if you can just give us a couple of nuggets on what we can do in society, especially with people with power and privilege, especially people with power and privilege, because as Black folks, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're sick and tired of always being the ones that are trying to fix things. We want to hear more from our white allies or people with power and privilege to step up to the plate and admit to some of the harm that has happened, to admit to some of the harm, and that's hard. But then also, how do you share or give up the power dynamics that you have?
Okay, beautiful. I have, let's see. So there are political solutions. I talked about some of those: universal health care, universal basic income, reparations, decolonization, and others. But you can't do that unless we're doing some deep personal work and some real spiritual work. And it's white folks, most especially, that need to do the deep work of undoing white supremacy culture as it manifests in us, and undoing rape culture, undoing sexism. Because if you think about it, how is it that policies get made? Policies get made by people who haven't done their work. We've got to do our personal and spiritual work. So I talk about my own family and my own upbringing, how we never talk about our emotions. God forbid we slow down enough to say, "Oh, my feelings are hurt." You think about enslavement. And I think about how it is that possible that my ancestors, who were enslavers, could actually view another human being as property, not as human, but as property. There's something that happened in my ancestors where they shut off any ability to have any empathy for human beings. That's a trauma response. That is really deeply pathological. And a part of opening ourselves up is to open ourselves to experience more emotional breadth and a sense of empathy. How do we do that? We have to kind of crack open how we think and do in the world. Some other, and also I think the violence towards women and how much we tolerate that, and I think how much we tolerate that in our own families, is unbearable. And we need to be better witnesses who stand up for people. To stand up for, don't be an innocent bystander. Don't be, no bystander is sort of innocent. If you're a bystander to something and you know something is happening, you must speak up. We have to create a culture of being able to speak up. And finally, I talk about experiencing love. The fact that so many people that I talk with had never experienced, they talked about their own childhoods and not feeling as if they were loved and cherished. That's very deep. And so how can we have a society where we're not loving our children and loving each other? So I talk a lot about having love for ourselves, having love for others, having love and deep reverence and respect for our food. And I think that's something that I see in you, Ms. Karen. I see what you're doing with Rise and Root and Rise Farms and Rise and Root Farm and the work that you've done. You have so much love for the land, love for the food, and love for your people. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about that before we take some questions. Talk about your work and what you're doing. It's inspiring.
Yes.
And beautiful.
Yeah, I think, people often ask, how did I come into the food world? And sometimes I say it's divine interventions. Sometimes I say it's my ancestors that point to me, they said, you have to travel this road. And I have been following that road with humility and love. It's very, very important to me because you can get caught up in misery. You can get caught up in trauma and hate. You can get caught up in that. But what I find my strength is being close to nature. Now that's
Yeah.
hard for a person growing up in a city, in the projects, in the Lower East Side, to say that. But I think I found myself when I was able to garden. I was able to garden, and even though it started in my backyard and then in my community garden, but what it gave me a sense of looking past all the external things that were happening in a city. The city is busy. The horns and the traffic and the people and the hustle and bustle. And I would get up 6 o'clock in the morning and go into my community garden, my backyard, and listen to birds sing.
Oh,
What? Listen,
yeah.
or look at a leaf and see an insect, or believe it or not, a hummingbird getting nectar, and feeling a part of that. Feeling a part, feeling the essence of nature. And even on the farm, farming is hard work, y'all. I'm not going to lie, farming is hard work. But at the end of the day, first of all, to ask my ancestors and to ask nature and ask the land for permission.
Yes.
Ask the land for permission. Do I have permission to put my hands in this soil so that I can and navigate in a way that I can produce food to feed people? Asking that in terms of grace and humility, asking that permission, and then going in and doing that, putting that seed in, knowing that the fruit of my labor is going to help feed people who need it the most. And for me, I think, I look at society. Why don't we have, like you said, a way where everyone should have access to healthy food?
Yeah.
Everyone should have access to clean water. Everyone should have access to affordable housing. These are basic needs that if we're human, we have to be in touch with that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing all my life. But then also being an activist and not afraid to ask those questions that need to be asked, not to be afraid to have elected officials be accountable, not not be beholden to donors, or or people who are tied to the money stream, but to be able to be beholden to God and nature. And that's where I get my tie, and that's where I get my strength in that. And trying to just understand, how do we get out of this mess. Right now we're at a critical time
Yeah.
in society. There's a lot of harm, there's a lot of trauma that's been happening the last couple of weeks. But I tell people, we need to come together. This is a moment in time where we as human beings, where our resolve is going to be tested.
Yeah.
So, either number one, are we going to run away and close the door and think about woe is me, or are we going to roll up our sleeves and come together in collective power? I always say social capital and communal wealth, collective power to make change. Because we can do this, folks. We can do this. You
Mm-hmm.
know, this is not this is not the only hardship we've had in our lifetime, but we can do it to make things better. And so take this moment in time to sit down, roll up your sleeves, get in community, strategically planned out how we can make this better, especially for those that need it the most. And so my job the next couple of years, starting today, is to really be in community, and those that need help, we need to wrap our arms around those that need help and
Mm-hmm.
bring them along in the journey for change.
Mm.
Done.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Absolutely.
Right.
We need each other. And the the earth is so abundant. We have plenty, there's plenty of land. There is so much food. There is so much beauty and abundance in the world. And we can't allow a small group of people to hoard all of that and to
Mm-hmm.
hoard it and hold it at gunpoint. That can't happen. And I think just hearing you talk about the love that you have, the deep reverence and respect for the land, the whole idea of asking permission of the land, asking permission of the food. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we asked each other permission? If people asked
Exactly.
women for permission? And I think there are deep teachings in the natural world, and we can create a sense of community around the natural world. And I think, especially if things are so tough, I agree with you so much that we have to come together. We have to embrace people in a deep reverence and respect, and that gives me courage. Like you give me, knowing that you're out there doing what you're doing gives me a lot of courage. And we have to be able to show people you can show up in love. You don't have to show up hiding or forceful, like to try to dominate other people. There are better, more loving and giving ways to show up in our work.
Yeah, just one more thing I want to say, Mariana, because we're at a point in time where this is the season, quote unquote, that people feel is giving. And
Mm,
that same sort of feeling that you have during this time, carry that throughout the year.
yeah.
It's not just the month of November and December. That same feeling of excitement, of coming together as a family, sitting down, breaking bread. That's a feeling you should have throughout the year. And
Mhm.
just don't think that when January 1st comes, it's all over, and then all of a sudden you put that feeling away until next year. If we can think about holding on that feeling of giving, of compassion, of humility that we have during this time of year, and carry it with us February, March, April, throughout the year, I think we'll be in a better place.
Yeah. And we have to be tough too.
Yeah, tough.
Are we supposed to stop at 8:30, or are we stopping at 9? I can't remember.
I
Because,
think we're stopping at 8:30.
oh, okay. I lost my ability to see the chat, so I don't know what's cooking in the
Oh,
chat. Although I know we were getting some help by some
let's
folks.
see.
Hang on, I can't see it anymore. But I want to know
I
if we have
think.
questions or people want to make a comment. Please feel free to put it into the chat or apparently there's a Q&A button, whether we can see it or not. I don't
Yes.
know what you see. I only just have a
I
box of emojis.
I
Hang on.
see I see remarks. I don't see questions. Love is on
Okay.
a menu, I see. Love is something you have to practice. It's not just something you say and not just something you feel. To begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling is one
Mm-hmm.
way in which anyone using the word in this manner automatically assumes accountability and responsibility. Bell hooks.
Bell
And they said
hooks.
bell hooks
Mm-hmm.
changed my life the first time I read a book.
Mm-hmm.
Another person says our non-human kin and relatives.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Another person said passively failing to disrupt harm when you see it normalizes that harm and gives people permission to continue that harm.
Mm-hmm.
And people are talking about, highly recommend the book about love by bell hooks, and you make that mention about bell
Yeah.
hooks in your book. And again, talking about the foster kids. If your foster kids relate to you, kinship care, you don't get any state support in most cases, often in grandmas, etc. So oppressive to keeping families together. Definitely the foster care system does that for us.
Yeah.
And so Marianne, tell us exactly, about but where can you get the book? Where are you going next? And what have been some of the ways that people have addressed the book?
Ah. Well, first of all, if you click below our faces, there's a little green bar that says "Buy the Painful Truth," and please buy it from Charis Books because that really helps them to do great and cool programming and support feminist futures. The future is feminine. I'm trying to bring back the matriarchy. That's what I'm working on now. I mean, I've always kind of been feeling like I've been pushing for women's rights. So you can find it below at Charis Books or at Penguin Random House as well. People are responding in really lovely ways, like in very emotional ways. I think I've gotten some really beautiful emails that people feel very, very touched, I think, by the emotion that's in the book. And one woman, I was on a speaking panel with an Indigenous woman. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, and when I just gave the overview of the book, she said, she grabbed the mic and said, that is like a documentary of my life. So it's resonating with folks who've experienced a lot of struggle and harm. And I think that to me is really important, that I've been able to reflect back what's going on, is to look underneath the facade. People put on a happy face, help try to make it in the world, but underneath there's so much pain. And I think listening into the pain and paying homage to that and having deep reverence and respect is really important. So that's what I'm working on next. I'm working on a book on how to bring an ethics of love into public health, trying to figure out how we can stop ourselves from being such a violent society. And so I'm looking at the ethics of public health, but I'm also thinking about how violence has landed in me. My own grandfather was helped to create the atomic bomb. So
Mm.
is that bomb in me? How is it that we can see Israel bombing the people of Palestine and killing the people of Palestine and forced starvation, mass starvation? This happened to the U.S. government did this to indigenous people in the United States, and the U.S. government is supporting Israel. How can we allow this to continue to happen? You would think that we would learn from history, but we need to evolve in a very deep way and fast. So that's what I'm working on, diffusing the bombs.
Well, that is absolutely excellent. Like I said, when I first picked up the book and I read it, first of all, even before the preface, I was reading and you said, in the very beginning, before even getting into the chapters, it's like, okay, you're with me on this journey, stay with me throughout this journey. I haven't gotten there yet. So and you started to explain exactly why you wrote the book. And so during the preface, it's like, wait a second, what's going on here? I haven't even gotten to the nugget of the book yet. And then just take me on a journey. And like I said, at first it was very, very hard because as a Black woman, those feelings surface, those feelings of being seen but not heard. We carry that with us all the time, Black women, whereby we have this facade that we have, this outer sort of face, but deep down inside, there's so many scars that we don't allow people to see.
Mm-hmm.
We have this idea that Black women always have to be strong all the
Oh,
time, and
yeah.
and we don't feel pain, and that transcends not only with hunger but through the medical society as
Sure.
well. And so, just reading the book and just going through, and you take us along the way, and then you stop and you pause and you say, are you still with me? You're still with me. There's more,
Yeah.
and I think that's really good. And like I said, it got to a point where I needed some sort of closure, and you gave that towards the end, which is really, really good. But it was just it's a journey, and I was along that journey with all those women, and I felt their pain. I felt what they were going through, and then I also, you were brave enough to even invoke some of the challenges that you had with your family, with your mom,
Yeah.
which was really critical when it came to emotions,
Yeah.
emotions. And I think and I think it needed, because I think just to have one side with the women without you coming in and bringing your side of emotion as well, I think it did it justice. So I was surprised that you did that, but I think it needed that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
then at the end, ways that we can be better as a society, grounded in love. And I always believe that. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
And I
you.
think I think
Does Stacia,
someone's supposed to be coming in.
does
Station,
Stacia
right?
come back?
Station's supposed to be in. Thank you so much, Marianne. This
No,
was
thank you,
absolutely
Miss Karen.
incredible. You are fabulous.
And
Thank you so much for reaching out to me.
can you also tell people how they can help your work that you're doing with farming and some of the things that you have in your future? What are you working on that you want people to know about in Georgia also, or beyond?
Yeah, well, in Georgia, I'm resting y'all, but I have a farm. It's called Rise and Root Farm. So look us up, donate. Another organization is Black Farmer Fund, where we're trying to help Black farmers and Black businesses look at wealth and financial education. So that's really important. And just the last thing I would ask the audience, just get involved.
Yeah.
Just get Silence and complacency is killing us. This is the time where we need each other. Get involved, make a difference, knock down doors. And if you have power and privilege, use it.
Use
Use it for
it.
good.
Use it. Yes. Don't waste it.
Thank you so much for that call to action. I think it's really important for people to hear. And thank you both truly for this amazing, important, beautiful discussion. I think everyone is going to walk away with some wisdom and clarity and something to think about tonight. But to the audience, again, thank you so much to the audience for your own side discussion that you were having. That was also incredible to read. But our event is ending tonight. And if you would like to purchase The Painful Truth About Hunger in America, like Mariana said, you can buy it from that link and get it from Charis to keep supporting our work so we can keep putting on more events like this. But yeah, that is it. Everyone have a great night. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening in, and stay in touch.